When I was sitting at Wrightsville Beach and I get the notifications popping up saying, hey, they signed Dmitry Orlov, hey, Mike Bunting, Freddie Anderson, Antti Raanta all coming back, Chris, I got excited. I got excited because I love the fact that they were getting aggressive in free agency and they're not really losing any key pieces from this past season that we saw, Chris.
It's true.
And if anything, they're actually getting some of those pieces back. We didn't see Andrei Svechnikov.
At least not yet, anyway.
Well, yeah. Well, we'll get into that here in just a second. That's Chris Lea, Dennis Cox here with you this afternoon on 99.9 The Fan. Carolina is not done, in my opinion, making moves. They're just not. Because we talked about how they had over $20 million in cap space coming into the season.
Yeah.
You and I even talked about, before the 4th of July holiday, about how a lot of guys in the NHL are probably going to take one-year contracts because the salary cap stayed relatively flat. Only went up about $1 million. Okay, so the cap's going to be kind of flat. Not a lot of teams are going to be able to sign guys to big long-term contracts like they would want to. Well, the cap next season jumps up about $4 or $5 million. So
this is a big bet on yourself.
Exactly,
year.
It's a big bet on yourself year. Okay, I'll take a one-year contract because, Chris, guess what? I can maybe make that 3 or 4 year contract that I'm really looking for happen next season when teams actually have the money to spend. But Carolina had the money to make moves. So guess what? You can overpay for Dmitry Orlov. But it's only for 2 seasons. It's a 2-year rental, essentially, is what I like to look at, as opposed to a 1-year thing. Mike Bunting, I think, is a really great move in the sense that he creates a lot of space for guys on the perimeter like Aho because he's a net front presence. So he's actually going to create a lot of space for guys like Aho or Seth Jarvis if he plays on that line with those guys. So he's going to create space, which might create more scoring opportunities for them as well. And then also you bring in Anderson, you bring in Raanta back to pair with Pyotr Kochetkov. I'm loving the moves they made so far. I'm loving these moves, Chris.
Yeah, no, it was definitely a great time for the Carolina Hurricanes last week.
Mm-hmm.
Great moves. It felt like I was expecting a little bit more, though, in the forwards group versus all the attention they put with the defensemen, right?
Yeah.
Having Orlov. Of course, we're still waiting to see if the Tony DeAngelo thing is going to go through. You would have thought that they were going to go a little bit more towards the goal scoring. And again, they did that a little bit with Bunting, but it really seems like they are also going with, all right, we already have a great defense. Mm-hmm. We're going to make our defense even better.
Even better.
So it's going to be harder for you to score. So even if it's hard for us to score, we'll take our forwards against your forwards because also our defense is going to stop you from scoring.
Yeah, and not only is Orlov going to be strong defensively, but what his ability is that really fits with the Carolina Hurricanes system. We always talk about how the Carolina Hurricanes defense last year led the league in goals as a collective. Well, now you add someone who actually fits the system perfectly in terms of his ability to move the puck up the ice, the way he skates the puck over the blue line as well. Like he can join up in the rush just as good as anybody that the Carolina Hurricanes have, really. So you add that into the mix. But the reason why I say they're not done is because that cap space now is just over $3 million left for Carolina. Well, if you want to get a Vladimir Tarasenko, whom I would love for them to get because, A, he's a goal scorer, but also he's a big body presence. He's 6'1", 225, 230.
Right.
Don Waddell talked about getting heavier up front.
Yeah.
That's the dude. That's a guy that fits. And if you sign him to 1 year, fine. That's great. Then he can go sign another long-term extension with someone somewhere else. But in order to get that cap space, Chris, some guys are going to have to move.
I was going to ask you, who needs to move in that case?
I don't want to say who needs to move, but who can get moved. So this is something
who can, like, if that were to happen, who are we saying goodbye to possibly?
You might be looking at, I would say, Brady Shea potentially, but here's the thing. He has a modified no-trade clause. So he can actually submit a list of 10 teams. So in his contract, he can submit a list of 10 teams where he says, I'm not going there. He can void those trades if he wants to. Okay, so that kind of hangs you up a little bit. Brett Pesce has a little bit of a no-trade clause as well. His is 15 teams. So a lot of these clauses sometimes kick in when the new league year starts. So this is why July 1st was such a big date because some clauses and contracts kicked over. You're not moving away from Jacob Slavin. You're not going to move away from Brent Burns, in my opinion. So
no,
I don't know. Maybe you have to look at some of your guys Like, for example, Teuvo Teravainen, but he has a 10-team list for his no-trade clause. But is someone willing to take on $5.4 million just for this season and someone that's going to be a restricted free agent, unless you're trying to get up into the cap floor? The NHL has a salary cap floor. You have to spend a certain amount. So maybe it's like, all right, we could take on this contract and we can get up to the cap floor. Martin Necas might be the guy. I don't know. Like, is there space up in the top 6 for either one of these guys? Because now when I look at it, I see Aho, I see Bunting, I see Kokoniemi, I see guys like Seth Jarvis, I see Andrei Svechnikov.
It's getting crowded.
Exactly. Things are going to get a little bit crowded.
Yeah.
Now, the trade piece I think that brings most value right now in terms of contract and his position is Brett Pesce, and then Martin Necas is right behind it. Those bring the most value. If you're going to go for a guy like Tarasenko, you're going to have to clear up cap space. Between those two guys, Necas makes $3 million, and Brett Pesce just over $4 million. So that's $7 million between those two guys. I don't know. I don't know if one of those will have to get moved, but if you want to add that piece, one of those guys is going to have to get dealt. Simple as that.
In your opinion, if the Tarasenko thing does not work out,
okay,
and the Hurricanes kind of go forward as is, there's still a logjam with the defense.
Massive logjam.
What needs to happen?
Great question. Some guys are at to swallow some pride. That's all I'm going to say. This is the reason why I think that someone gets moved, is because you're not going to sign Orlov to $7.75 million a year and put him on a third defensive pair. You're just not.
Yeah.
You're not going to just skate him at 15 minutes.
Yeah.
You're not going to do it. Okay, so who loses ice time? You're going to take Jacob Slavin off the ice?
No.
Okay, well, who's on that left side? Who's left? Brady Shea. But also, are you going to pay someone $5.3 million or $5.25 million to skate 15 minutes?
No.
I'm not.
No.
So this is why, again, this team's going to make some moves between now and then. It's going to be this team that we see it right now is going to look different. And here's the thing as well. They might not make those moves until after the season starts. That's a real possibility.
There's no rush.
The's no rush.
There's no rush right now.
Those things might happen after the season starts, but I will say this. Their 6 defensemen they have lined up right now, good luck topping that 6.
Oh, for sure.
With Slavin, Burns, Pesce, Shea, and then you throw in Chatfield with Orlov, you ain't beating that.
And that's what it felt like as far as like last week when you have the top scoring defense defensive core in the NHL, and then you just add to that. It just kind of felt almost as if they're doubling down on that, but then also in some ways doubling down on the forwards that they have while adding Michael Bunting, and anything else they add on top of that is just a cherry on top. It wasn't as much offense as I expected.
Yeah.
More so defense that could also be offense in Orlov as well. So
I think Bunting's biggest contribution is going to be his net front presence and his physicality. He's not afraid to mix things up.
A second Stefan Nason, which is good.
Well, but like a better version of Stefan Nason.
Yeah.
He's going to create a lot of space for guys around the net. So I think
he's probably going to be second line, Stefan Nason probably fourth line.
Probably fourth line, all honesty, because you can still run back the Stahl, Martinook, Foss line. So
yeah.
This team is far from complete, but I love the moves that they've made so far, Chris.